80-ton stone giants once walked across an island. Without wheels or metal, the ancient people of Easter Island faced an engineering challenge that seems impossible to us today. This video reveals the ingenious method that may have finally solved this centuries-old mystery, showing you how human creativity can move mountains, or at least statues. How did legends of walking stones hide a brilliant technical truth? And what can a fallen statue tell us about a civilization's greatest triumph? When you see a seemingly impossible task, what is your first instinct to solve it? These statues are not merely scattered decorations. They form a deliberate, silent congregation across the slopes of an extinct volcano. This is Renewable, the quarry, where almost half of all the Moai still rest, unfinished or awaiting their journey. From this single source, the islanders intended to distribute their stone guardians to coastal platforms all around the island's perimeter. Look at a map. The distances are not trivial. Some of these multi-ton figures were meant to travel over 10 miles across rugged, rolling terrain. This was not a casual art project. It was a generations-long logistical operation on a remote speck of land, the most isolated inhabited place on Earth. The nearest continental shore is over 2,000 miles away. Here, every resource was finite. The population at its height was likely only in the thousands. They had no wheels, no draft animals, no metal tools. They had stone, rope, wood, human muscle, and an unwavering vision. This context transforms the Moai from curious artifacts into profound statements of human will. The mystery deepens not because their creation seems magical, but because it seems mathematically improbable. How do you move an 80-ton block of stone, taller than a 2-story house, with such limited means? For a long time, the outside world could not fathom an answer, so it invented fantastical ones. But the truth, as we are discovering, is far more impressive than any fiction. It lies not in lost technology or otherworldly help, but in a brilliant, elegant understanding of physics, one that was literally right under their feet. The legends passed down for generations spoke of the statues walking. When the first European ships arrived in the 18th century, islanders told these stories to the bewildered newcomers. The great stone ancestors, they said, traveled to their coastal posts by their own power, guided by the spiritual force or mana of the chiefs and carvers. To outsiders, this was charming mythology, a fanciful tale from an isolated culture. It was far easier to believe in magic than to conceive of the mundane, backbreaking physics that might actually make an 80-ton block of rock move. So for centuries, the walking story was filed away as pure folklore, a beautiful but impractical metaphor, yet the stubborn physical reality remained. The statues did move, so how did the first wave of modern researchers approach this concrete puzzle? Their theories swung to the opposite extreme, abandoning the vertical poetry of walking for the horizontal grind of dragging. The most persistent idea was the log roller theory. Imagine an army of workers, hundreds strong, hauling ropes attached to a Moai lying flat on its back. Beneath it, a path of felled palm tree trunks acts as rollers, a primitive conveyor belt of wood. As the statue is pulled forward, workers rush to the back to retrieve the rollers that pop out and carry them to the front again. It seems plausible, even obvious. It's how many ancient cultures moved heavy things, but when you scale it up to Easter Island's reality, the problems multiply exponentially. First, the resource cost. The island's famous deforestation was likely a complex process, but using vast quantities of precious timber solely as disposable rollers for every single statue would have been an astonishingly wasteful and perhaps catastrophic expenditure. Second, the terrain. The roads from the quarry are not flat highways. They slope up and down over rocky, uneven ground. Controlling an 80-ton dead weight on rolling cylinders on a slope is a recipe for disaster. One slip and the statue becomes an unstoppable wrecking ball. Third, the archaeology. If they were dragged flat, why are so many abandoned statues found upright, planted in the earth along the transport roads as if they were paused mid-journey? The log roller theory could not adequately answer these questions. Another hypothesis imagined a sledge, a wooden platform on which the Moai would lie, pulled over a lubricated path of sweet potatoes or other vegetation. This, too, demanded immense wood resources and an enormous pulling force, and it left no clear explanation for the upright, abandoned Moai. A more dynamic idea involved a rocking method. Here, teams of ropes would be attached to the top of a standing statue. By pulling rhythmically from side to side, they might tilt the giant back and forth, inching it forward with each sway. This got the statue vertical, which matched some archaeological finds, but the physics are terrifying. The statue's center of gravity is enormously high. Each tilt risks a point of no return, where a slight overpull would send the monolith crashing onto its face, shattering centuries of work. The margin for error is vanishingly small. While each of these early theories had a glimmer of logic, each also hit a wall of practical or evidential contradiction. They either required unimaginable resources, created unacceptable risks, or failed to align with what was actually found on the ground. This left researchers at an impasse. The myth spoke of walking. The conventional engineering solutions all pointed to dragging or rocking, and in between lay a chasm. This gap forced a brilliant shift in perspective. What if the folklore was not just a pretty story? What if the phrase "the statues walked" was not a spiritual metaphor, but a literal, technical description of how they moved? This question would lead to a revelation so simple, so elegant, that it would change everything. The broken giants themselves hold the first clues to their journey. Scattered along ancient roads, you find Moai that never made it to their final platforms. Many lie face down, their features pressed into the earth, while others rest on their sides or backs. But look closer. Their bases, the part that would have connected to the ground, are not flat. They are subtly curved like the bottom of a rocking chair and often tapered toward the front and back. This is not a mistake or an artistic flourish. This is engineering. A flat base is for standing still. A rounded, convex base is for motion. It is the difference between a cinder block and a rocking horse. This single design feature, repeated across statues, is a deafening hint. It tells us the builders never intended to drag their creations lying down. They built them to be upright, to be dynamic, to pivot and sway. The statues were designed from the very beginning to move in a standing position. Now follow the roads. These are not just worn paths in the grass. They are clearly defined, slightly sunken corridors that radiate out from the quarry. The ground is cleared, and in places, you can see smaller stones deliberately placed along the edges like curbs. The roads themselves are not perfectly level. They have a gentle, V-shaped profile, which would naturally help guide and stabilize something tall and heavy moving down the center. And look at the orientation of the fallen statues. They are not pointing in random directions. They are aligned with the roads, as if they fell forward or backward along their intended line of travel. This pattern is critical. If a statue being dragged on logs tipped over, it would likely tumble sideways across the path. But a statue that fell while moving upright would topple along its axis of travel, forward or backward, exactly what the evidence shows. Each fallen Moai is like a fossilized moment of a journey interrupted. The tapered base, the prepared roads, the directional falls together. They sketch the outlines of a method. They tell us the movement was controlled, the statues were vertical, and the process, while ingenious, was never without risk. One misstep, one snapped rope, and a century's work could be lost in an instant. This forensic map in stone sets the stage. It narrows the possibilities from 100 wild guesses to a few plausible, physical actions. The question then becomes not if they moved upright, but how exactly did they make an 80-ton stone figure take a step? The legends were not just stories, they were instructions. In 2012, a team of researchers made a leap of faith grounded in physics. Archaeologists Terry Hunt and Carl Lipo, working with Rapa Nui engineer Sergio Rapu, listened to the oral history with new ears. What if walking was not a metaphor but a manual? Their revolutionary hypothesis was breathtaking in its simplicity. The Moai they proposed did not drag or roll. They walked upright, swaying from side to side, inching across the island in a controlled, rhythmic shuffle. This idea solved multiple puzzles at once. Look at a finished statue's posture. It doesn't stand bolt upright. It leans forward, its center of mass pitched over its curved base. This isn't a design flaw. It's the key to the motion. A forward lean makes the statue want to fall forward, but that curved base acts as a pivot, a fulcrum. Imagine trying to move a towering, top-heavy bookcase. If you and a friend stand on either side, grip the top and pull it rhythmically toward you, you can rock it onto one corner, then the other, shuffling it forward with each sway. The statue's forward tilt and rounded bottom are engineered for exactly this motion. Teams of rope pullers wouldn't be hauling a dead weight. They would be partners in a dance, using coordinated tugs to set the giant rocking. With each tilt, the statue's base pivots on its curved edge. As it rocks to the other side, a small forward shift occurs. Repeated thousands of times, this shuffle adds up to miles. The genius of this method is its efficiency. Instead of requiring hundreds of people to pull a static load, it might need only a few dozen well-coordinated teams working in a precise rhythm. It turns an act of brute force into an exercise in timing and balance. It also aligns perfectly with the island's ecological reality. No vast forests needed for log rollers. Just strong ropes, likely made from the fibrous bark of the hau-hau or miro trees, and human ingenuity. This theory transformed the narrative from one of grim toil to one of communal ceremony, a rhythmic procession where the ancestor, animated by the living, literally walked into its place of power. It made the impossible seem not only possible but elegant, yet a brilliant hypothesis on paper is one thing. Proving it with the weight of real stone is another challenge entirely. The true brilliance of the Moai is not just in their faces but in their feet. Look closely at the base of a statue. It is not a flat slab meant to be buried. It is a smooth, curved surface, shaped almost like a shallow boat hull or a giant rocking chair runner. This D-shaped profile is the first masterstroke of walking engineering. It transforms the entire multi-ton figure from a static monument into a dynamic object, a pivot waiting for a push. The carvers at Renewable did not simply sculpt a human form, they sculpted a machine for motion. This intentional design is paired with another critical feature, the statue's distinctive posture. Every Moai leans forward, its center of mass pitched over its own feet. To our modern eye, this might look like a mistake, as if the sculptor misjudged the balance, but it is the opposite. This forward tilt is deliberate physics. It means the statue, when upright, naturally wants to fall forward. That desire is the potential energy the walkers would harness. The curved base provides the pivot, and the forward lean provides the directional urge. Together, they create a system that is stable yet ready to move. Think of a child's weighted toy, the kind you knock over and it rights itself. The Moai is like that, but engineered to fall forward just a little bit with each controlled rock. This design also cleverly manages the terrifying issue of the center of gravity. While the statues are tall, their mass is distributed. The broad, heavy base and the bulk of the stone concentrated in the torso lower the center of mass significantly. When the statue is upright and stationary, it is surprisingly stable. But when teams begin to rock it, that curved base allows the entire giant to rotate on a very small contact point with the ground, reducing friction dramatically. With each coordinated pull on the ropes attached high on the statue, the Moai would tilt onto the forward curve of its base. As it reaches the apex of its tilt, gravity takes over, and the forward lean pulls it down, causing the base to slide or pivot a few precious inches forward before rocking back to the other side. Each cycle, each sway is one step. The carvers were not just artists, they were mechanical engineers in stone. They understood that to move an 80-ton block 10 miles, you do not fight physics, you invite it to dance. They pre-solved the problem of transport in the quarry itself by shaping a figure that was inherently capable of the journey. This turns our perception of their work completely around. They were not carving a finished product, they were assembling a vehicle. Stone needs a partner to dance, and for the Moai, that partner was rope. The second principle of the walking method transforms the statue's engineered form into a living, moving entity. Teams of workers, likely organized into small groups, would have attached thick, braided cords to the upper portions of the giant. These were not ordinary ropes. They were crafted from the incredibly strong inner bark of the island's hau-hau tree, a fibrous material that could withstand immense tension. One set of ropes would be fastened high on the statue's head or upper back. Another set, perhaps a guiding line, would be secured at the rear. This configuration created a system of control points. The teams at the sides were the primary movers. By pulling rhythmically on their ropes, they would tilt the statue onto the forward curve of its base. The team at the rear served as both a brake and a steering mechanism, applying tension to prevent an uncontrolled forward fall and to help pivot the giant for slight directional changes. This was not a chaotic tug of war. It was a precisely choreographed act of collective physics. Imagine the scene. Dozens of individuals, not hundreds, spaced around the towering stone figure. A rhythm would be essential. Historians suggest that chants or the steady beat of a drum likely coordinated the effort. On the first beat, the left team pulls. The massive stone groans, pivoting onto the left forward corner of its curved base. On the next beat, the right team takes over, rocking the statue onto its right forward corner. With each sway, the forward pitch of the Moai's body, built into its very shape, converts that lateral rocking motion into a tiny forward shuffle. The genius here is in the distribution of force. No single person is trying to pull 80 tons. Instead, each team is leveraging the statue's own weight and momentum, using their ropes to simply guide and amplify a natural rocking motion. The rope becomes an extension of human will, a flexible lever that turns coordinated muscle into controlled mechanical advantage. This method explains how a relatively small group could manage such a colossal task. The strain was dynamic and shared, shifting from one team to the next with the rhythm. It turned an impossible haul into a manageable, even rhythmic procession. The statue, in a very real sense, was walking with the people, animated by their unified effort. This partnership between human ingenuity and stone's potential reveals a profound understanding of balance and cooperation. But how could they be sure this elegant theory actually worked? The proof would require putting stone into motion once more. This rhythmic dance of rope and rock translated into a specific, repeatable step. The third principle is the walking motion itself, a mechanical cycle of tilt, pivot, and settle. Picture one complete cycle. A team on the left pulls their rope, tilting the giant onto the forward curve on its left side. At this moment, the entire weight of the statue is balanced on that single, curved edge, a pivot point no wider than your hand. This is where the magic happens. Because the base is convex, it doesn't dig into the ground like a flat edge would. Instead, it allows for a tiny, crucial rotation. As the statue leans over this pivot, its forward pitch and momentum cause the base to roll or skid forward just a few inches. Then, as the team on the right begins their pull, the statue rocks back through center and over onto its right forward edge, repeating the process. With each full left-right cycle, the statue shuffles forward. It doesn't walk in the way we do with a stride. It advances with a dignified, swaying shuffle, settling momentarily onto the flat of its base between rocks to rest and stabilize. You can understand this by moving a heavy piece of furniture in your own home. To shift a refrigerator, you don't try to push it flat. You tilt it back onto its rear wheels, or you rock it from side to side, using its own weight to help you scoot it forward an inch at a time. The Moai walkers were doing the same thing, but their appliance was an 80-ton stone ancestor, and their floor was the uneven earth of a volcanic island. The convex base was the masterstroke that made this possible. A sharp corner would have dug into the soil, acting as a break or even jamming completely. But that smooth, rounded edge allowed the statue to pivot and rotate with minimal resistance, turning a potential point of friction into a point of motion. Calculations by modern engineers suggest that a coordinated team, working in steady rhythm, could have moved a statue several hundred feet in a single day. That pace transforms an impossible journey into a manageable, albeit monumental, undertaking. A trip of several miles might take weeks or months, a timeline that fits within the scope of a community project, a procession woven into the life of the island. When you visualize this, the scene changes from one of sheer labor to one of coordinated grace. The giant doesn't lurch or stagger. It sways with a slow, ponderous rhythm, inching its way across the landscape like a ship rocking on gentle swells. It is a living progression, a stone figure brought to temporary life by the synchronized will of the people guiding it home. But could a modern team actually make a stone giant walk? To move from elegant theory to tangible truth required more than calculations. It demanded action. In 2012, archaeologists Terry Hunt and Carl Lipo partnered with a team of engineers and a dedicated group of volunteers to stage one of the most compelling experiments in modern archaeology. They did not have 80 tons of volcanic rock to spare. Instead, they created a faithful concrete replica of a Moai standing 10 feet tall and weighing a formidable 5 tons. While smaller than the largest statues, its proportions and, most importantly, its curved base and forward lean were perfect copies. This was the walking hypothesis stripped to its physical essence. Could human hands, using only ropes and rhythm, bring it to life? The experiment was conducted on open ground, and the results were both dramatic and revealing. With 3 teams of rope pullers positioned around the replica, they began the coordinated rocking, left, right, left, right. After a few tentative sways to find the rhythm, the concrete giant began to shuffle forward. It moved, with each controlled tilt onto its curved base. It pivoted and settled a few inches ahead. The basic principle was proven beyond doubt. A moderate team, perhaps 18 people, could indeed maneuver a multi-ton figure in a standing position using this method. The statue walked, yet the experiment revealed more than just success. It highlighted the very real challenges the ancient engineers would have faced. On perfectly flat, prepared ground, the motion was manageable, but introduce a slight slope or an unseen rock, and the dynamics changed instantly. Controlling the momentum became the greatest test. If the teams pulled too hard on one side, the statue could over-tilt, gaining a dangerous momentum that threatened to send it into an uncontrolled fall. This risk illuminated a likely reason for the many fallen statues found along the roads. A snapped rope, a misheard chant, a moment of fatigue, and the delicate dance could end in a catastrophic crash. The modern volunteers learned firsthand that this was not a simple haul. It was a continuous, delicate negotiation with gravity. Every step required absolute attention and communication. This insight transformed the abandoned Moai from symbols of failure into markers of a learning process, moments where the balance was lost but the knowledge was gained. The experiment did something profound. It turned lines on a page and measurements of fallen statues into a shared physical experience. For a brief moment, a team in the 21st century stood in the shoes, or rather gripped the ropes of the ancient islanders. They felt the strain in their muscles, the tension in the fibers, and the collective sigh of relief when the giant settled safely after a successful series of steps. This hands-on approach bridged a centuries-wide gap, transforming abstract theory into a visceral, believable reality. It showed that the walking method was not only feasible but also remarkably efficient, a testament to human ingenuity that required not brute force but brilliant coordination. The proof was no longer just in the shape of the stones but in the movement they allowed. The journey of a single Moai transforms theory into a tangible story of human endurance. Let us follow one figure, which we might call Moai 001, from its birthplace in the volcanic rock to its eternal vigil by the sea. Its story begins not with movement, but with silence, as master carvers painstakingly free its form from the quarry wall using only hand-held basalt tools. Once its curved base is fully shaped and its forward lean perfected, the real work commences. Teams carefully attach thick, braided ropes high on its back and sides, their knots tested and retested. The first motion is the most critical. With coordinated pulls, they coax the giant from its earthen cradle, rocking it millimeter by millimeter until it stands free upon the prepared road, a sudden and awesome presence towering over the people below. The walking begins as a slow, deliberate rhythm. A lead caller sets the pace with a chant and the teams respond. Left pull, rock, settle. Right pull, rock, settle. Each full cycle might advance the statue only a hand's breadth, but over a day those inches become feet. The path from Renewable is not a flat highway. It rolls over the island's natural contours, presenting constant challenges. A gentle downward slope requires the rear team to act as a constant brake, their ropes taut, leaning back with all their weight to prevent gravity from turning a controlled shuffle into a catastrophic slide. An upward incline demands a surge of coordinated effort, the teams pulling in unison to conquer the grade one sway at a time. Obstacles are met with ingenious, on-the-spot solutions. A low rock outcrop in the path cannot be moved, so the teams must steer the multi-ton figure around it. This requires subtle adjustments. By pulling longer on one side's rope, they can pivot the statue on its curved base, walking it in a slight arc. For a minor dip or hole, they might use wooden levers to raise one side of the base just enough to slide flat stones or packed earth underneath, creating a more level track. This is not a scripted engineering project, but a dynamic, problem-solving procession. Every person is alert, reading the statue's tilt, the tension in the ropes, and the ground ahead. Such a journey could not be rushed. A trip of several miles might take many weeks. The procession becomes part of the island's rhythm. At night, the Moai stands still, a silent guardian on the road while the teams rest. There may be pauses for ceremony to honor the ancestor the statue represents or to repair worn ropes. This transforms the transport from mere logistics into a cultural pilgrimage, a moving ritual that bonds the community to the stone and to the land it traverses. The statue's journey is their shared endeavor, its progress a measure of their collective will. Imagine the final approach. The coastal Ahu platform comes into view, its long stone altar waiting. The last few hundred yards require the most precise control, as the teams must walk the Moai perfectly into position for its final ascent onto the platform, a feat that would involve a separate and ingenious ramp system. For Moai 001, this story ends with its back to the sea, watching over the descendants who walked it home. Each statue that ever stood on an Ahu represents not just artistry, but thousands of careful steps, countless coordinated pulls, and the unwavering persistence of a community that made the impossible walk. The island itself was the ultimate test of their method. Easter Island's terrain is a rugged tapestry of rolling hills, sharp volcanic rock fields, and pockets of soft, unstable soil. This was not a blank canvas for easy transport. Every mile presented a unique puzzle. A gentle upward slope required the teams to pull with greater unison, converting their rhythmic sway into forward momentum against gravity. A slight downhill grade, however, turned that same gravity from a helper into a constant threat. Here, the rear guide ropes became vital brakes, with teams leaning back, their heels digging into the earth to control the statue's natural urge to slide. The walking method's genius was its inherent adaptability. Unlike dragging a dead weight on logs, which would have jammed or slewed sideways on uneven ground, the rocking motion could absorb minor bumps and dips. The statue's rounded base could pivot over small obstructions, and by adjusting the pull on one side, the teams could steer the giant in a slow, deliberate arc around a large boulder or a patch of unstable earth. Major obstacles demanded creativity. Facing a steep descent, they might have used a secondary set of anchor ropes tied to fixed points ahead, creating a controlled lowering system to prevent a runaway slide. In muddy stretches, they could have laid down temporary pathways of packed stone or even wooden planks to create a firmer footing for the pivotal base. This was not a single solution, but a toolkit of techniques applied by masters of their landscape. The average journey of several miles meant that path preparation was a critical first step. Scouts would have walked the intended route, noting every hill, every drainage ditch, every potential hazard. In some places, they likely cleared brush and even moved smaller stones to create a smoother corridor. This forethought transformed a chaotic natural landscape into a navigable, if challenging, processional road. Each successfully navigated mile stands as a testament to the Rapa Nui people's profound environmental intelligence. They did not try to conquer their island's ruggedness with overwhelming force. Instead, they learned to move with it, to read its contours and use its own physics to their advantage. The Moai did not just walk across the land, they danced with it, guided by a community that knew every rise and fall of their home by heart. The true cost of moving the Moai was not measured in timber, but in time and coordination. This walking method reveals a profound economic choice made by the islanders. Earlier theories imagined a civilization consuming itself, felling entire forests to create rolling highways of logs for just a single statue. The ecological story painted was one of tragic overreach, but if the statues walked upright, that narrative changes dramatically. The resource demands shift from the unrenewable to the renewable, from vast quantities of wood to the strength of community and the fibers of living plants. Think about what you would not need. You would not need to cut down hundreds of trees to lay a temporary track that would be used once and then discarded. The walking method required wood, yes, but in modest, manageable amounts. Small wooden levers could help adjust the statue's position or lift a corner of its base to clear an obstacle. Temporary supports might steady it during a rest. These are tools, not consumables. This is a crucial distinction. It suggests the islanders were not recklessly expending their most precious material resources. They were investing their ingenuity instead. The primary engine of transport was not a forest, but the people themselves. Human labor, organized into rotating teams, became the sustainable, renewable power source. This was not a slave-driven ordeal of endless drudgery. It was likely a coordinated communal effort, similar to an old-fashioned barn raising. Different groups from across the island may have taken turns, contributing their labor as part of a social or ceremonial obligation. Teams would work in shifts, maintaining a steady rhythm without exhausting any single group. This rotation was vital. It turned a potentially crushing long-term task into a shared, manageable project woven into the fabric of society. The stamina was communal, not individual. Then there were the ropes, the literal lifelines of the operation. These were not imported or made from scarce materials. They were crafted from the inner bark of the hau tree and other fibrous plants, resources that could be harvested sustainably. When a rope frayed or snapped under the immense strain, it was not a catastrophe. It could be spliced, repaired, or rewoven from new material. The knowledge of rope making was as essential as the knowledge of carving. This represents a closed-loop system, perfectly adapted to the island's limits. The ambition was colossal, but the materials were humble and locally sourced. This efficient balance tells us something profound about the Rapa Nui civilization. They were not masters of abundance who carelessly consumed their world. They were innovators of scarcity, who used deep understanding and clever social organization to achieve monumental goals with minimal physical footprint. Their greatest resource was not in the ground or in the trees, but in their collective mind and their ability to work together toward a shared vision. This reframes their legacy from a cautionary tale of collapse to a masterclass in working within your means. It shows that true innovation often blossoms not in spite of constraints, but because of them. The rhythmic sway of the giant was not just a matter of physics, it was a heartbeat. This procession, this act of moving stone, was almost certainly woven into the very soul of the community. Transporting a moai was far more than an engineering task. It was a sacred communal event, a living ritual that reinforced social bonds and spiritual beliefs with every single step. Imagine the soundscape of that journey. The steady, deep chants of a lead caller would not only coordinate the teams, but also invoke the mana, the spiritual power of the ancestor being transported. These chants were likely stories, genealogies, and prayers, transforming the physical rhythm of pulling into a spiritual rhythm of remembrance. Each coordinated heave on the rope was not merely moving weight, it was participating in the retelling of a family's history, a tribe's origins. The journey itself became a moving ceremony. At significant points along the road, perhaps at the crest of a hill offering the first view of the sea, the procession might pause. Here, offerings could be made and a feast shared among all participants. This communal meal did more than just restore energy, it solidified the shared purpose. It turned obligatory labor into a collective expression of identity and devotion. The people were not just workers, they were celebrants in a grand, slow-motion pageant that honored their past and secured their future. The integration of work and worship here is profound. It shows a culture that did not separate the practical from the sacred. The technical skill required to balance an 80-ton statue was inseparable from the spiritual intention to connect with the ancestors it represented. The ropes were not just tools, they were conduits of shared will. The road was not just a path, it was a ceremonial way. This cultural layer enriches our understanding immeasurably. It means the statues were not merely being relocated, they were being activated. Their journey from the quarry to the coast was a rite of passage, a process of bringing the stone to life through collective effort and song. A moai standing silent on its platform is a powerful symbol, but a moai in motion, animated by the chants and unified strength of its descendants, was a living monument. This perspective helps answer a deeper question: why go to such incredible lengths? The answer lies in meaning. The effort itself, the shared struggle and triumph, is what embedded these figures into the heart of the culture. It made them unquestionably, undeniably important. The technical method allowed the statue to walk, but it was the ritual that made the walk sacred. Across the ancient world, the impulse to move mountains took many forms. From the river valleys of Egypt to the chalk downs of England, other cultures faced similar challenges of megalithic transport, yet their solutions reveal a fascinating contrast to the rocking giants of Easter Island. Take the great obelisks of Egypt, monolithic needles of red granite weighing hundreds of tons. The evidence and ancient depictions point to a method of staggering scale and preparation. They were moved on enormous wooden sledges, dragged over lubricated earthen causeways by vast teams of laborers, sometimes numbering in the thousands. The key was the prepared infrastructure, the road itself, which was an engineering project as monumental as the stone it carried. Once at the Nile, the obelisk was transferred to a specially built barge, a vessel so massive its dimensions were recorded with pride by pharaohs. This was a triumph of centralized power, abundant resources, and a landscape defined by a predictable, navigable river. Similarly, the builders of Stonehenge, over 4,000 years ago, transported their famous bluestones from mountains in Wales, a journey of over 150 miles. While the exact methods are still debated, the leading theories involve a combination of sledges, rollers, and perhaps most ingeniously, water transport. They likely used a network of rivers, dragging the stones on wooden frameworks to the coast, floating them on rafts, and then hauling them inland again. This method leveraged the geography of Britain, its waterways becoming natural highways. Now place the Rapa Nui method beside these. The differences are profound. Easter Island had no great river, no vast timber reserves for colossal sledges or barges, and no centralized pharaonic authority to command limitless labor. Their solution emerged from a different set of constraints. Instead of building a road to carry a passive load, they engineered the load to move itself. Instead of consuming vast material resources, they invested in social coordination and rhythmic skill. The Egyptian and British methods are essentially about reducing friction, making the stone slide more easily. The Easter Island method is about harnessing momentum, making the stone dance. This is not a matter of one being better, but of brilliant adaptation. Each culture looked at the resources they had, the landscape they lived in, and the social structure they built, and devised a method that made their vision possible. The Rapa Nui approach stands out for its elegant minimalism. It required no foreign materials, no radical transformation of the landscape beyond clearing a path. Primary machinery was the statue's own shape and the synchronized will of the people. This comparison shatters any simplistic idea of linear progress in ancient engineering. It was not a ladder where some cultures were more advanced, but a diverse tree of innovation, with different branches growing solutions suited to their unique environment. The Egyptians had the Nile and the administrative power to mobilize thousands. The builders of Stonehenge had the forests and rivers of prehistoric Britain. The people of Easter Island had volcanic rock, fibrous trees for rope, and an intimate, small island community. They all achieved the seemingly impossible, but they did so by listening to their own world and answering with distinct, breathtaking creativity. This global context does not diminish the Moai walkers, it elevates them. It shows that human ingenuity, when faced with a monumental task, does not converge on a single answer. It diverges, flowering into a multitude of brilliant, context-specific solutions. The silent, walking giants of a remote Pacific island thus claim their rightful place not as an isolated mystery, but as one of humanity's most inventive chapters in the ancient art of moving the unmovable. No scientific idea is ever accepted without a healthy dose of skepticism, and the walking theory is no exception. While the image of swaying giants is compelling, serious researchers have raised important and valid questions. They argue that the method, while elegant in principle, might not survive contact with the hard reality of an 80-ton block of volcanic rock. One major concern is the issue of damage. Rocking a multi-ton statue back and forth onto its curved base would concentrate immense stress on that small pivot point with every single cycle. Over the course of a journey spanning miles, could this repeated impact cause the base to crack, chip, or even fracture entirely? Some critics point to certain fallen statues that appear to have damage at the base, asking if this is evidence of a transport failure rather than a simple fall. Another challenge is the sheer energy expenditure. While the walking method uses momentum cleverly, it still requires continuous, rhythmic effort to tilt the statue from side to side. For the largest moai, the forces involved would be staggering. Teams would be fighting not just weight, but inertia, the tendency of a massive object to stay still or keep moving. Starting each rocking cycle from a dead stop for a statue that heavy would demand a tremendous initial surge of force from the pullers, potentially requiring more people than the theory initially suggests. This leads to the most dramatic criticism, the risk factor. The critic's point is sobering. For a smaller 10-ton statue, a loss of control might mean a manageable topple. But for an 80-ton colossus, the same mistake becomes a disaster of biblical proportions. Once such a giant began to fall, its momentum would be unstoppable. It would not simply tip over, it would likely slam into the ground with enough force to shatter its delicate features, snap its neck, or embed itself irrecoverably into the earth. The margin for error, they argue, shrinks to almost zero at that scale, making the method too perilous to have been the standard practice. These are not dismissals but crucial pressure tests. They force proponents of the walking theory to refine their models. Could the Rapa Nui have used supplemental techniques? Perhaps for the very largest statues, they employed temporary earthen berms or wooden frameworks along the sides to act as training wheels, limiting the tilt and preventing a catastrophic fall. Maybe the transport roads were carefully engineered with a very slight V-shape to naturally cradle the statue's base and provide lateral stability. The debate pushes the question from could they do it to how did they manage the risk so consistently. This rigorous back and forth is not a weakness of archaeology, but its greatest strength. It transforms a captivating story into a robust scientific inquiry. Each criticism is a new question, and every question demands better evidence, more precise experiments, or a deeper look at the archaeological record. It reminds us that understanding the past is not about finding a single, perfect answer and closing the book. It is an ongoing conversation where each new voice, whether in support or doubt, helps us inch closer to a clearer, more nuanced truth. The walking theory becomes stronger not by ignoring these challenges, but by meeting them, by acknowledging where the uncertainties lie and inviting the collective ingenuity of the field to help solve them. This vibrant debate ensures that the moai are not silent relics, but active participants in a modern discovery, their secrets still emerging from the dust of centuries. Digital archaeology now brings a new kind of witness to the journey. By translating the physics of the walking method into complex computer models, researchers can run thousands of virtual transport missions in the time it takes to brew a pot of coffee. These simulations are not video games, they are rigorous digital experiments. Every variable can be precisely defined and controlled. The exact weight and center of mass of an 80-ton moai, the tensile strength of how rope, the friction coefficient of volcanic soil on a damp morning. With these parameters set, the simulation begins and the virtual statue rocks into motion. The power of this approach lies in its ability to explore the extremes. A physical experiment with a 5-ton concrete replica teaches us invaluable lessons, but what about the true giants, the colossi that weighed 15 times more? Building and moving such a replica is prohibitively dangerous and expensive, but in a simulation, it is just a change in a number. Scientists can task a digital crew with walking a 70-ton, an 80-ton, even a hypothetical 90-ton statue across a digitally recreated slope from the quarry. They can introduce a sudden, simulated rope failure on a steep incline to see how the system fails, or adjust the timing of the pulls to find the most energy-efficient rhythm. This process generates hard data that fieldwork alone cannot easily provide. How many kilonewtons of force are actually acting on that rear guiding rope during a controlled descent? Precisely how much forward shift occurs with each perfect rocking cycle for a statue of a given height and weight? The computer can calculate the optimal team size not as a guess, but as a mathematical function of the statue's dimensions and the desired speed. It can map the points of highest stress on the statue's curved base, predicting where wear or cracks might appear over a long journey. This digital toolkit does not replace the hands-on experiment or the archaeological evidence. It converses with them. When the simulation predicts that a particular slope would require a secondary braking system, researchers can return to the ancient roads and look for exactly that kind of evidence, perhaps post holes for anchor stakes or areas of unusually prepared ground. It turns speculation into a testable hypothesis. By leveraging these modern tools, we are not imposing our technology on the past. We are using it to listen more carefully. We are quantifying the genius, measuring the intuition of the ancient engineers in the universal language of physics. This multifaceted approach, blending legend, physical experiment, and digital modeling, builds the strongest possible case for how these monuments moved. It shows that the walking method was not just a clever trick, but a sophisticated, scalable technology, honed through experience and deeply understood by the people who performed it. The silent data from a computer screen, in its own way, echoes the rhythmic chants that once guided the giants home. The broken statues along the ancient roads are not merely monuments to failure. They are pages in a textbook of stone, each telling a story of a lesson learned the hard way. The perfection of the walking method did not spring forth fully formed. It was the product of generations of trial and error, an iterative process of innovation where every fallen giant, every cracked base, and every snapped rope taught the community something invaluable. Imagine the first attempts. A team, using only intuition, tries to rock a newly carved figure. They pull too hard on one side, and with a groan that echoes across the quarry, the statue tips past its balance point and crashes to the earth. The work of years is lost in an instant, yet from this heartbreaking moment a critical question emerges. How much pull is too much? The answer would be remembered, refined, and passed on. The next team, perhaps the sons and daughters of the first, would know to use a more measured rhythm. They might develop a specific chant to keep the timing perfect. They might discover that soaking the ropes made them more pliable and stronger. Each successful journey and each disastrous fall contributed data points to a growing body of communal engineering knowledge. This knowledge was not written in books. It was encoded in oral tradition, in the specific cadence of work songs, in the muscle memory of master rope pullers, and in the subtle design changes seen in the statues themselves. Look at the varied shapes of the Moai bases. Some are more sharply curved, others more gently rounded. Some statues have a more pronounced forward lean. These are not random artistic choices. They are likely experiments in form, different generations of carvers testing which shape provided the most stable yet mobile pivot. A base that was too flat would not rock easily. One that was too rounded might be uncontrollable. The optimal design was found through practice, not theory. Similarly, the transport roads themselves show signs of adaptation. In some places, the path widens, perhaps where a particularly tricky maneuver was regularly performed. In others, you might find evidence of packed stone or small terraces built to level a difficult section, a permanent improvement made after a near disaster. This is the true engine of human progress. It is not the lone genius having a sudden flash of insight, though that plays a role. It is the slow, collective accumulation of small improvements, each built upon the successes and failures of those who came before. A master carver did not invent the perfect statue in one lifetime. He stood on the shoulders of 100 previous carvers, each of whom had contributed a slight refinement to the angle of the chin, the depth of the eye sockets, or the curve of the back. The same is true for the walking teams. The precise coordination, the optimal team size, the best knots for the ropes, all these were discovered through relentless, practical repetition. This process honors the Rapa Nui not as mystical figures who knew secrets lost to time, but as pragmatic, brilliant engineers. They observed, they experimented, they failed, and they tried again. Their greatest monument is not any single Moai, but the refined, reproducible system they created to bring them all to life. This legacy of iterative problem-solving connects them directly to us. Every modern innovation, from the smartphone to the spacecraft, is the product of the same relentless cycle, built upon countless past attempts. The silent, patient giants of Easter Island remind us that true mastery is never a single act of creation, but a long conversation with the possible, written in the language of trial and error. This relationship between method and landscape reveals a profound ecological intelligence. The walking theory does more than explain how the statues moved. It reshapes our understanding of the island's entire environmental story. For decades, a dominant narrative held that the Rapa Nui people caused their own downfall through reckless deforestation, felling every last palm tree to roll their giant statues, leading to societal collapse. This became a stark parable about environmental overreach. But if the statues walked, that dramatic tale begins to unravel. The walking method required wood, certainly, but not in the staggering quantities demanded by log rolling. You would need strong ropes and perhaps some wooden levers, not entire forests laid down as disposable tracks. This suggests the islanders' monumental ambition was not necessarily an engine of ecological catastrophe. It points instead toward a more nuanced reality, one where a society could pursue grand cultural projects while still operating within the sustainable limits of their environment. Newer archaeological and paleoecological research supports this shift in thinking. Studies of ancient pollen and soil samples tell a more complex story than a single human-driven wipeout. They suggest the island's palm forests were already under pressure from natural climate shifts and, crucially, from the arrival of the Polynesian rat, which ate the seeds and saplings, preventing the forests from regenerating. The loss of trees was likely a slow-motion process with multiple causes, not a sudden clearing spree for statue transport. This changes the moral of the story entirely. It moves us away from a simple cautionary tale of ecocide and toward a portrait of a resilient people adapting to a changing world. The walking method itself is a masterpiece of that adaptation. It represents a conscious choice or perhaps a brilliant discovery that allowed them to achieve their cultural goals with minimal strain on their most vulnerable resource. By investing in human coordination and renewable rope fiber instead of consuming vast amounts of timber, they found a balance. Their engineering was not in conflict with their environment, it was a dialogue with it. This efficiency extends to human energy as well. The walking method, while demanding, used rhythm and momentum to distribute the physical load across a manageable, rotating workforce. This was not a project that consumed the entire population in endless, grinding labor. It was likely integrated into the social and ceremonial calendar, a shared endeavor that fit within the community's capacity. This careful management of both natural and human resources speaks to a deep understanding of carrying capacity, the ability of an island to support its people and their ambitions over the long term. It reframes the Moai not as symbols of hubris, but as testaments to a society that sought to harmonize its spiritual aspirations with the practical realities of survival on a remote rock in a vast ocean. When we look at the fallen giants today, we are not just seeing a mystery of transport solved. We are witnessing the physical evidence of a sophisticated, sustainable approach to living on Earth, one that balanced monumental creation with the imperative of preservation. Their greatest lesson may not be in how to move stone, but in how to move forward with purpose without breaking the very ground you stand on. The stone itself was believed to be alive with potential. When the team set the giant rocking, they were not just solving a physics problem, they were performing a ceremony of awakening. The rhythmic sway, the groaning pivot of the base on the earth, the collective heave of the pullers, all this would have been perceived as the moment the ancestor stirred from its slumber in the quarry. To see an 80-ton monolith shift and settle, was to witness a profound transformation from inert rock to a being in motion. This was not merely transport, it was a ritual of reanimation where human effort breathed a kind of temporary life into the stone, guiding the ancestor's spirit to its new home. The line between a carved object and a living presence blurred with every step. This symbolic layer answers the deeper question of why such a method was not only used but cherished. Dragging a statue flat on its back would have been a purely logistical act, moving a weight from point A to point B. But walking the statue upright preserved its dignity and its power. It allowed the ancestor to arrive standing tall, having traversed the land of its descendants under its own perceived power. The procession became a sacred parade, a moving connection between the past and the present. The rhythmic chant of the workers likely served a dual purpose, coordinating muscle and invoking memory, tying each pull on the rope to a name, a story, a lineage. Imagine the emotional resonance of such a journey for the community lining the path. They were not watching laborers struggle with a burden. They were witnessing their history come to life and walk among them. Each successful sway forward was a collective achievement, a shared affirmation of their identity and their continuity. A Moai standing silent on a platform is a powerful symbol, but a Moai in motion, animated by the synchronized will of its people, was a living prayer. This transforms our understanding of the walking method from a clever engineering hack into a core cultural practice. The physics made it possible, but the symbolism made it essential. The method's very elegance served this spiritual purpose. The controlled, dignified shuffle mirrored the deliberate pace of ceremony, not the frantic haste of a construction site. The need for perfect coordination fostered social unity, turning individual effort into a harmonious whole. Even the risks involved, the ever-present possibility of a catastrophic fall, would have deepened the ritual's gravity. Success was not guaranteed. It was earned through skill, focus, and perhaps, in their view, the favor of the ancestor being moved. This intertwining of faith and function shows a worldview where no division existed between the practical and the sacred. To move the stone was to honor the ancestor, and to honor the ancestor required moving the stone in the most respectful way possible. The walking was the meaning. These fallen figures are the most honest storytellers of all. Scattered along the ancient roads, the abandoned Moai offer a raw, unfiltered look at the walking method in action, capturing moments where the delicate dance with gravity was lost. Their positions are not random. Some lie perfectly prone, face down with their features pressed into the earth, their long bodies aligned precisely with the direction of the road. This suggests a forward fall, a loss of control during a rocking cycle where the statue tipped past its balance point and could not be recovered. Others rest on their sides or backs at odd angles, indicating a different kind of mishap, perhaps a snapped rope or a sudden lateral slip on uneven ground. Each orientation is a frozen frame from a moving picture that stopped abruptly. By studying these poses like forensic detectives, researchers can reconstruct the final seconds of the journey. A statue found face down with its base slightly dug into the soil at the head of a gentle slope might tell a tale of a controlled descent that gained too much momentum. One discovered on its side near a sharp turn in the road could reveal a failed steering attempt. These are not mere accidents, they are data points. They show the precise boundaries of the method, the physical limits beyond which even the most skilled teams could not compensate. The damage on the statues themselves adds another layer of evidence. Chips and fractures along the curved base, or stress cracks radiating from the thin neck, are not signs of poor craftsmanship. They are the scars of the journey, the physical price paid by the stone during the relentless rocking and occasional impacts. This damage pattern helps engineers calculate the stresses involved, confirming that the statues were indeed subjected to the dynamic, pivoting forces the walking theory describes, not the steady, dragging friction of a sledge. Perhaps most telling are the moai found upright, partially sunk into the earth along the roadside, as if they were deliberately parked and never retrieved. These might represent planned pauses, places where the journey was halted for the season or for ceremony, with the intention to resume later, an intention that, for reasons lost to time, was never fulfilled. They stand as silent sentinels of interrupted purpose, highlighting that these transports were long-term projects woven into the fabric of communal life, not single, frantic efforts. These incomplete journeys do not signify failure of the civilization, but the inherent risk of its ambition. They humanize the ancient engineers, reminding us that they worked without safety nets or computer models. Every transport was a high-stakes experiment. A fallen giant represented a catastrophic loss of resources and labor, a community tragedy, yet they did not stop. They learned, they adapted, and they continued. The very presence of these roadside figures, therefore, is a testament to perseverance. It shows a culture that accepted setback as part of the process, that was willing to strive for monumental achievement even with the full knowledge that sometimes the stone would fall. In their silence, the abandoned moai speak volumes about the courage it takes to make the impossible walk. The story of the walking statues is no longer confined to the past. Its rediscovery and validation have sparked a profound cultural and intellectual revival, one that reaches far beyond the shores of Easter Island. For the Rapa Nui people, this modern understanding is not just an archaeological footnote. It is a powerful reclamation of their ancestors' legacy. For generations, outside narratives often framed their history as a mysterious, even tragic, tale of a lost civilization that collapsed under its own ambition. The walking theory dismantles that simplistic view. It replaces an image of reckless consumption with one of brilliant, sustainable adaptation. This shift is not merely academic. It instills a deep sense of pride and continuity. When a Rapa Nui child learns that their ancestors engineered a way to make 80-ton giants walk using only rope, rhythm, and profound insight, they are not learning about a distant, disconnected people. They are connecting to a lineage of innovators, to a heritage of problem-solving that speaks directly to human potential. This knowledge strengthens cultural identity, turning ancient stone into a living source of inspiration and resilience for the community today. This ancient ingenuity now echoes in the halls of modern engineering and design. Researchers in robotics and materials science study the walking method as a case study in efficient, low-energy transport. The principle of using a controlled rocking motion to move a massive object with minimal ground friction is a concept that inspires ideas for moving heavy equipment in delicate environments, or for designing robots that can traverse rough terrain without complex machinery. The method is a masterclass in distributed force and collaborative systems. It demonstrates how a large, seemingly impossible task can be broken down into a series of small, coordinated actions performed by a group, a principle applicable to everything from crowd management to cooperative robotics. The statues teach us that sometimes the most advanced solution is not the one that adds more technology, but the one that cleverly leverages the inherent physics of the object itself. Modern engineers look at that curved base and see a brilliant pre-industrial bearing. They see a system that turned a monumental challenge into a rhythmic, almost graceful procession. On a global scale, the story has captured the public imagination because it speaks to a universal truth. It is a narrative about overcoming seemingly impossible odds with creativity rather than brute force. In a world often focused on high-tech solutions, the image of a community moving a mountain through unity, rhythm, and sheer cleverness is deeply resonant. It symbolizes human resilience, It reminds us that our greatest tools have always been our capacity for cooperation and our ability to see the world not just as it is, but as it could be manipulated with insight. The Moai have become more than archaeological wonders. They are icons of perseverance, their silent faces now associated with a triumphant, ingenious journey. Ultimately, the legacy of the walking method is about connection. It connects the past to the present, proving that ancient knowledge, when understood, is never truly lost. It connects a remote island community to a global audience, sharing a lesson in innovation born from constraint. It connects the disciplines of archaeology, physics, and engineering in a shared pursuit of understanding. And perhaps most beautifully, it connects us to the minds of those ancient builders. We look at a Moai and we no longer see just a mysterious stone figure. We see a vehicle engineered for motion. We hear in our mind's ear the rhythmic chant and the groan of rope. We feel the tense, coordinated pull of the teams. The method bridges centuries, allowing us to walk a few imaginative steps alongside them. This story does not end with the last statue placed on its platform. It continues every time someone learns about it and marvels at the elegant simplicity of the solution. The giants may stand still now, but the idea they represent, the proof of what humans can achieve together, keeps walking forward, inspiring new generations to find ingenious ways to move their own world. The silent walk of the Moai now echoes in modern classrooms, offering a blueprint for learning that is as dynamic as the method itself. This ancient achievement presents a perfect case study for science, technology, engineering, and mathematics education, transforming abstract principles into a gripping human story. Students are not just told about physics, they can feel it. By building scale models with rounded bases and testing how to rock them forward with strings, they directly engage with concepts like center of mass, pivot points, and force distribution. A textbook diagram of leverage becomes a tangible challenge. How do you keep your cardboard ancestor from toppling over? This hands-on exploration makes complex ideas intuitive and unforgettable because the students are not passive listeners. They are active participants in the same problem-solving process that unfolded centuries ago. Beyond physics, the project teaches profound lessons in teamwork and communication. Just like the ancient crews, a student team must coordinate their pulls, develop a shared rhythm, and communicate instantly to correct a tilt. A successful transport becomes a lesson in collective achievement, where every member's role is critical to the whole. It demonstrates that solving a grand challenge is rarely about one brilliant individual, but about a group learning to work as a single, intelligent system. This social dimension bridges STEM with essential life skills, showing that engineering is inherently human. The story also naturally fosters interdisciplinary thinking. To fully understand the Moai, you must weave together strands from archaeology, which provides the evidence of fallen statues and roadways, from engineering, which deciphers the mechanics of the walk, and from anthropology, which explores the cultural meaning behind the monumental effort. A student investigates not just how it was done, but why it was done, appreciating that technology never exists in a vacuum. It is always shaped by the values, resources, and beliefs of the society that creates it. This holistic view counters outdated stereotypes that label ancient methods as primitive. When students see the sophisticated physics, meticulous planning, and risk management involved, they recognize it for what it is: advanced engineering adapted to its time and place. It reframes human history not as a linear march of progress, but as a diverse landscape of brilliant innovations, each perfectly suited to its context. Integrating such narratives into education does more than teach facts. It inspires a different kind of creativity. By showing that groundbreaking ideas emerged from a remote island with no metal or wheels, it broadens a student's sense of where innovation can come from. It encourages looking at constraints not as barriers but as catalysts for ingenuity. The lesson is clear: you do not need the most advanced tools to solve a monumental problem. You need insight, cooperation, and the courage to experiment. This empowers learners to see themselves as potential innovators, no matter their resources. The walking statues become more than a historical mystery solved. They become mentors in stone, teaching a new generation that the most elegant solutions are often waiting to be discovered in the wisdom of the past, ready to guide our steps into the future. The unfinished giant still lies in its quarry, a silent question weighing 270 tons. This colossal figure, known as El Gigante, represents the ultimate boundary of the walking method's ambition. If teams could maneuver an 80-ton statue, could the same principles scale to something more than 3 times as heavy? The physics become exponentially more daunting. The forces on the ropes, the stress on the curved base, the sheer inertia of starting such a mass rocking, all push against the limits of what seems feasible with human muscle and fiber cord alone. This unanswered question points to a fascinating possibility: that the Rapa Nui may have developed auxiliary techniques specifically for their grandest projects. Perhaps for El Gigante, they envisioned a hybrid system. Temporary wooden outriggers or earthen berms could have been built along its flanks, acting as stabilizing rails that limited the tilt and prevented a catastrophic fall, effectively creating a guided channel for the rocking motion. Or they might have used a system of levers and packed earth ramps to inch it forward in a more static, incremental lift and shift process for the initial, most dangerous stages of the journey. The absence of a single, universal answer is itself an important insight. It suggests their engineering was adaptive, not rigidly dogmatic. The method was a brilliant core principle, but its application could be tailored to the specific challenge of each statue and each stretch of terrain. Future research must look beyond the statues themselves to the landscape they traveled. The ancient roads hold a record of their passage in the very soil. Advanced ground-penetrating radar and high-resolution topographic scans could reveal subtle wear patterns invisible to the naked eye. Are there consistent paired depressions along the sides of the roads that might indicate the placement of temporary stabilizing posts? Does the compacted earth show a distinctive signature from the repeated, focused pressure of a rocking, pivoting base versus the dragged groove of a sledge? Analyzing the microscopic wear on the roads could tell us not just that they moved, but precisely how their weight interacted with the ground. Similarly, the study of rope technology is crucial. Experimental archaeologists are already recreating cords from the hau-hau tree, testing their tensile strength, flexibility, and durability under dynamic loads. How many ropes would be needed for an 80-ton Moai? How often would they need to be replaced or repaired during a multi-week journey? The answers lie in blending materials science with hands-on replication. The path forward is inherently collaborative. Modern structural engineers can build sophisticated computer models to simulate the stresses on a 270-ton block during a controlled rock, identifying failure points that ancient builders would have learned through experience. Robotics experts might design automatons that test the walking motion at scales too dangerous for human volunteers. But this technical inquiry must walk hand in hand with the living cultural memory of the Rapa Nui people. Their oral traditions, craft knowledge, and deep understanding of the island's resources are irreplaceable guides. A master rope maker's intuition about fiber twist and knot strength holds data as valuable as any sensor reading. This partnership ensures that the research honors the context from which the statues emerged, framing each experiment not as a test of primitive capability, but as a dialogue with sophisticated ancestral knowledge. These lingering mysteries are not failures of understanding, but its very engine. Each unanswered question, from the purpose of certain stone tools found near the roads to the social organization of the pulling teams, is an open door. The story of the Moai is not a puzzle with one final piece waiting to be snapped into place. It is a continuous exploration where each discovery refines the picture and reveals new, more subtle questions beneath. This ensures the giants never become static museum exhibits. They remain active participants in a conversation across time, their silent forms challenging every new generation to look closer, think deeper, and listen more carefully to the whispers of the past. The journey of discovery, much like the statue's own travels, is far from over. It simply awaits the next coordinated step. The very constraints that would seem to doom the project were the seeds of its genius. On a remote island with no metal, no wheels, and no beasts of burden, the Rapa Nui people faced a problem that appeared to have no conventional solution. Their environment offered no easy answers, only a list of things they did not have. Yet, it was this very scarcity that forced a leap of imagination. Instead of trying to import a foreign method or wishing for different tools, they looked at what they did possess: volcanic rock, fibrous trees, and human ingenuity, and they asked a revolutionary question. What if the problem is not how to move the statue, but how to make the statue move itself? This shift in perspective is the heart of innovation under constraint. When you cannot add resources, you are forced to become smarter with the ones you have. The island's limitations did not stifle creativity, they channeled it, focusing the collective mind on an elegant, physics-based solution that was perfectly adapted to their unique reality. The curved base was not an artistic flourish, it was a bearing. The forward lean was not a mistake, it was a motor. The people and their ropes were not just laborers, they were a distributed control system. The statue ceased to be a passive object and became an active partner in its own journey. This principle echoes far beyond the Pacific. Think of the early astronauts hurtling into the unknown with computers less powerful than a modern watch, solving life or death problems with slide rules and sheer nerve. Consider the engineers who design life-saving medical devices for remote communities, using locally available materials to create affordable, robust solutions. In every case, the constraint, whether it is budget, materials, or time, acts not as a wall but as a crucible. It burns away the obvious, inefficient answers and forces the emergence of something leaner, more clever, and often more beautiful. The walking method teaches us that necessity is not just the mother of invention, she is its most demanding and brilliant teacher. She does not simply hand you an answer, she forces you to discover a new way of seeing the problem entirely. When we face our own modern challenges, from designing sustainable cities to building resilient communities, we can draw strength from this ancient lesson. Our own limitations, be they environmental, economic, or social, are not signals to surrender. They are invitations to innovate. They ask us to look at the resources we do have, to rethink the fundamental assumptions of the task, and to find the elegant, hidden leverage points within the system itself. The silent, successful journey of an 80-ton giant whispers a powerful truth. The most profound breakthroughs often come not from having more, but from thinking differently about what you already possess. Their journey was a testament to the power of a shared vision. We have walked alongside these stone giants, tracing the elegant physics of a curved base, the coordinated rhythm of pulling teams, and the resilient spirit of a community that refused to accept the impossible. This story is far more than a solved engineering puzzle. It is a window into a world where monumental ambition was matched by profound ingenuity, where every resource was cherished, and where moving a mountain was a collective act of faith. The silent Moai no longer stand as remote mysteries. They are teachers. They remind us that our greatest challenges are rarely overcome by force alone, but through insight, cooperation, and the courage to see a problem from a completely new angle. Their legacy is a whisper across the centuries, urging us to look at the constraints in our own lives not as dead ends, but as invitations to innovate. It asks us to remember that human potential, when united by purpose, can make even stone walk. If this exploration into the depths of history sparked your curiosity, consider subscribing for more journeys into our shared past. We would love to hear your thoughts on the walking method in the comments below. What modern challenge do you think could benefit from such ancient, elegant thinking?